Welcome to Observations, a program that is designed to introduce those of you who do not yet know God to Him. A program designed for those who know Him so that they might know Him better. This program, Observations, is designed to share the way to God. Not only explain why He created the universe and authored life, but to share with you what He wants. Observations is designed to communicate from God's perspective how He has communicated with us so that we know precisely what He's offering. Also that you might know how to capitalize on His offer. And this program is designed to present history, past, present, and future, all from the perspective of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, from the perspective of God, so that we might know man's history from his time in the garden to his ultimate celebration of 1,000 years of living on this planet, with the entire planet transformed into the Garden of Eden, those kinds of conditions, living, camping out with God, to an eternity where we will witness the birth of a new universe, this one with us as participants. We have 4 individuals that will be contributing to this program, more if they wish to over time. These 4 individuals, none of which were chosen. If you wonder why, this cast of characters was assembled, it was because we volunteered. If somebody else wishes to contribute that understands the Torah, that knows Yahowah, that is a member of the covenant, then they are welcome to join us. And as for me, my name is Craig. We have Scott. Scott was the program director of Shattering Mist, the program that we concluded not so long ago on Genesis Communication Radio Network. We can, for those of you who would like to listen to those programs, they're archived at the site blessyahowah.com. Hello, Scott.
Hello. Good to see you again. Or hear you again, or whatever this will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have Kirk.
Good morning.
Kirk was, morning, Kirk, a regular contributor to the Shattering Mist program during its last several months on the air. And sometime during this program, we expect to hear from Larry, who is the most regular contributor to the Yahowah Shabbat program that we do on the Torah once a week on Blog Talk Radio, and Larry will be joining us shortly. I want to begin with a bit of news, Scott, if that's all right with you. Kirk. I read a story this morning. The world now has its first Sharia-compliant airlines. In Malaysia, they've launched an airline that is wholly Sharia compliant. They will be serving halal food. Have you ever heard the name halal used by Yahowah? You know what it means, what it is, what it represents?
It's the first name of, or the first part of the name of Hasatan.
Halal ben Shakar, right?
Halal ben.
Right. Halal ben Shakar. Satan is only presented by name twice in the entire Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It's both in the book of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, and there he is introduced as an emissary of Babylon, as someone who wants to be worshipped as God, not as the adversary, as someone who is above God. Allahu Akbar should scream into your mind at this point as the only known wannabe deity that wants to be worshipped as God and seen above God. And Hasatan, the adversary, which is not a name but a descriptive title, is named Halal ben Shakar. And so on this Sharia-compliant airline, they will be serving Satan's food, named after Satan, halal. But beyond that, it will also be fully Sharia compliant. Do you guys know the basis of Sharia law?
Pretty much.
Not well enough to give an answer, but I know what I know that it's not very very friendly. It's
Well, the basis
the Quran, right?
Well, no. Sharia law is probably 5% based on the Quran. 95% of Sharia law is based upon the words and deeds of Muhammad. And the words and deeds of Muhammad are chronicled in the Hadith. There are 4 collections of Hadith comprised of Muhammad's words and deeds written within 200 years of his death. Ishaq compiled the first collection of Hadith in his Sirah, or biography. Tabari also wrote a chronological presentation of what Muhammad said and did, and what happened immediately upon Muhammad's death, and his history, or Tariq. And then there are 2 topical collections of Hadith, the same Hadith, but arranged by topic as opposed to chronological order, one by Muslim, one by Bukhari. They comprise 100%, along with the 5% that comes from the Quran, of Sharia. And so it's based entirely on Muhammad's words and deeds. But Muhammad was a thief. He was a pirate. He was a slave trader. He was a kidnapper. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. He was a liar. He was amongst the most perverted, disgusting, murderous individuals who ever lived. He said of himself, "I have become victorious with terror." And so, in a Sharia-compliant aircraft, what we would have is someone mirroring Muhammad's behavior. So welcome. Board the aircraft, and you are encouraged to rape the stewardesses. You're encouraged to have sex with other passengers' children. You can even have sex with your pet goat if you brought a goat on board the aircraft. You are encouraged to kill anyone who isn't a Muslim. And, of course, you are entitled to enslave them and rob them. Can you imagine the experience on a Sharia-compliant airline?
Fly on the friendly skies.
Fly the friendly skies of Hasatan.
And I was just sitting here thinking about a joke about the landing.
Well, yeah, the landing is designed by Muslims, and therefore will fly into buildings to kill as many infidels as possible while screaming Allahu Akbar. So I thought that was spectacular news that yes, indeed, the world now has a Sharia-compliant airline. Don't think I will be flying it anytime soon.
No.
Add that to the list of things that we have that we did not need.
No. One of my favorite people, Jackie, who is the principal editor for each of the books that I've written, the composite volumes of Yada Yah, Intro to God, and Questioning Paul. She sent me an email that has come from a healthcare worker, a physician, I believe, if not a physician, then a nurse practitioner in Germany. Speaking of the million Muslims who have entered Germany. And her assessment is, and having encountered them, because he said the very high percentage of them are seriously ill, is that, well, she describes them as animals. She says that they are sick with diseases that they don't even know how to treat. And in European hospitals, diseases that Europe and America rid themselves of through sanitation and through proper hygiene, a century ago. And that they're extraordinarily aggressive, demeaning towards women. If a woman tries to treat them, they absolutely refuse. Their children are often very sick, and if they try to charge them for their child's medicine, even a fraction of the cost, they'll say, "You keep the kid. You fix him. Yours." That they will, if they do not like the way they have been treated, if they think that they're not receiving the the best that you can offer, absolutely free, because as Muslims, she says that they view themselves as vastly superior to all others. They're viciously stabbing healthcare workers. But they're communicating diseases and an attitude that is extraordinarily hostile, where this healthcare worker says, it isn't worth it. I've devoted my life to this, but I'm going to move to another country. I'm going to begin to practice medicine elsewhere because this is miserable.
I read that email. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, and they say that just like America, you can't have an honest discussion about the problem. Now, she says none of these people are properly trained. She says you couldn't put any of them to work. They're very poorly educated. The women are not educated at all. The women have no interest whatsoever in working, and the men are ill-equipped to work. And they think that they're entitled to everything: housing, medical care, pensions, food. Just think of the burden. You've got a group of people who are angry, who think that they're superior, who are contributing nothing, and are wholly disruptive to the system as it currently is, and they have brought in already 1 million of them. We predicted this would
Never
happen.
recover from the diseases.
No.
I'm telling you, it's the pestilence.
No, all religions are diseased. Now, as it comes to Islam, I think I know and understand the religion as well as anybody alive. And so I'm in a position to be extraordinarily judgmental of Islam and judgmental of the stupidity of Europe of accepting these refugees and not of dealing with Islam appropriately. And I'm telling you that it is inhumane. This very notion of the elitists thinking that it is compassionate to welcome the refugees and to bring them into one's country. I'm saying no, it's exactly the opposite. It is incredibly hostile. It is incredibly immoral. Because what they're going to do is they're going to do as Sharia dictates. They're going to do as Muhammad did. All of them know. Many of the Muslims coming in are lousy Muslims. They've got no idea who Muhammad was. They have no idea what the Quran says. They have no idea of any aspect of their religion. It's like, most nominal Christians are clueless as to what their religion actually says. But there's a significant portion of them. In most Islamic countries, it's about 60% that are actually good Muslims. And therefore, they know that Muhammad was a terrorist. They know the meaning of jihad. They know what is expected, in fact, demanded of them. And they will be as Muhammad was. They will be rapists. They will be pedophiles. They will engage in bestiality. They will rob. They will kill. They will terrorize. Because Muhammad did all of these things, and all of these things are not only sanctioned in Islam, but required by the religion. So, bringing that into your home isn't merciful. It isn't moral. It isn't reasonable. It is the antithesis of those things. It isn't compassionate. When I looked at the list of people who were killed in San Bernardino, by the two Muslims that were allowed to practice their religion, or the woman who was the ringleader actually being brought into this country. To say that it was merciful, to say that it was compassionate, to say that it was good or moral or wise to allow her to come in when she and her husband took the life of so many innocent people, then you have lost the ability to be reasonable.
Well, apparently we have. They keep doing it. I mean, the newspapers are full of it. The television uses that way. They all take a position.
Sure. And just like the situation in Germany, as this writer of this email says, you can't tell the truth. The media has zero appetite for it. They will not allow any discussion that brings up the harm. And what they are constantly doing is the media now, every day, there's multiple stories in every major media outlet of some Muslim family that is expressing their appreciation for being brought in and how they fled Islamic terrorism. And, you know, you can find those stories. And those stories are the ones that are being presented. But what's not being presented is the reality that what happened in Paris is a direct result of the immigration of Muslims into the continent. And to tell that story, to explain the actual nature of Islam, to share with people that there's no such thing as an extremist or radical Muslim, that there is no radical or extremist Quran, that it is what it is, period. There's only one Muhammad, only one Quran, only one group of hadith that have any credibility. There's only one Sharia. There aren't variations of Islam.
Well, they've even told us that. Erdogan said it. He said there's no...
Moderate Islam.
There is Islam. That's it.
Right. No, there's just Islam. There's just Islam. And the Islam of terror is the purest form of the religion. It's not a corruption of the religion. It's not a radicalization of the religion. It's not an extremist interpretation of the religion. It is the religion. Islam was founded as a criminal enterprise, and it grew based on terror. And all you have to do is read the Quran. Read the 8th surah of the Quran, which explains that Muhammad's first terrorist act was armed robbery, and that he did it specifically because he wanted to rob his neighbors, and that he was murderous, and he was sadistic in the process, and that he engaged in kidnap. This is the nature of Islam. It was born as a criminal enterprise, and it grew through terrorism. Now, I don't want to pick solely on Islam, because we are bringing you this first program of observations on what the world would call Christmas Eve. I drove by my neighbor's house in the front lawn. There's 2 billboards in the front lawn. And it says in bold letters, all caps, Christ - Mass, God's gift to the world. You know what that does to me when I see that?
It should make you sick.
It does. Turns my gut. Makes me want to puke. Then it makes me want to say, what in the hell is wrong with you? And of course, it sits across from a little rock church on the road, on the highway. Let's speak a little bit about this and why this person is so deceived. Let's begin with the notion that Christmas is a celebration of God's birthday.
We had this.
Was God born?
No.
Can God die?
He's Hayah.
Yeah, he is Hayah, which the verb Yahowah introduces himself to Moshe by nature before he introduces himself to Moshe by name. And what we find is that the verb that he used to describe his nature is the basis of his name. So Yahowah says, I am who I am. It's Ihaya, which is says that I exist, I was, I am, I will be. As a matter of fact, when I began this program, I said we're going to talk about history, past, present, and future, the history of man, past, present, and future. And that is because, from Yahowah's perspective, as Hayah, as one who was, is, and always will be, history plays out the same way. The same way as the verb Hayah that you just mentioned, Kirk. And in Hebrew, verbs do not get stuck in time like they are in English. In English, we have past, present, and future, and variations of past, present, and future. There is no such thing in Hebrew. So, in Hebrew, a verb comprises all time. It is true then, as it is now, as it is true, as it will be true in the future. And Yahowah says that he is Hayah, and his name, Yahowah, is based on the verb Hayah, which means to exist, past, present, and future. Therefore, God cannot be born. So the very nature of Christmas is a bogus concept, as is the basis of Christianity, that God died for your sins. God cannot die.
No.
And so you're celebrating an event that is preposterous. And you're ascribing a preposterous event to God. And even the notion, God's gift to the world, wait a minute. If it was God that was born, then how is it God's gift to the world? Who in the hell is God that is giving the child if the child is God? Huh? I mean, think it through, people. Now, beyond the fact that there is no birth of God, does God ever mention a holiday called Christmas?
Never.
Does God ever have a holiday associated with the winter solstice?
Never.
Do the Babylonians have, and the Romans and the Greeks, did they have a holiday associated with Christmas?
Indeed they do.
And did they celebrate the winter solstice?
They certainly did.
What did Yahowah say about the religious ways and the political ways of the Gentiles?
He said avoid them like the plague.
That's right. He did, didn't he? So, folks, there is no mention of anything even remotely akin to Christmas in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, or even in your Christian New Testament. It is a Babylonian pagan holiday associated with man's invention of false gods.
Because we can do it better, right?
Right. So when Yahowah, which was the actual name, there was no one ever named Christ. Christ isn't even a name. It means, it's based on the Greek word Christos, which means to be drugged. And he wasn't a Greek, which means he did not have a Greek title, much less a Greek name. His name was actually Yahowah. What does that mean, Scott?
Yahowah saves.
Yeah, that's what it means. So here we have Yahowah. Do you know what day that Yahowah arrived?
Well, I'm sure it's Yom Kippurim.
Nope.
Would have come in the fall.
Nope. It wasn't yet. Close with Yom Kippurim, but not exactly.
Asuka?
Absolutely. What does Sukkah mean?
Asuka is to walk with God.
Camp out with God, right?
God be with
Yeah, Sukkah means to camp out. So it's to camp out with God. So man camping out with God is the celebration of Sukkah. He arrived on Sukkah. When what is another name? It's in fact the apostle Yahuchanan, corrupted to John, introduces him in terms of his arrival in association with something called tabernacles. That's from the translated via the Greek. Is there a connection between tabernacles and Sukkah?
Well, it is. Tabernacles is Sukkah.
Yeah. Sukkah speaks of a tent, one that you would use for a temporary shelter or home, and it is the tent of the witness, for example, is called the tabernacle. Tabernacles is just another name for Sukkah. So he told us that he arrived on Sukkah. So if you're going to celebrate a date associated with Yahowah's arrival, you would have to celebrate what date?
Sukkah.
Does Sukkah ever coincide with the winter solstice?
Could not happen.
No, never. Impossible. Because isn't Sukkah the 15th day of the 7th month?
Yes, sir.
And doesn't the calendar begin right around the vernal equinox with the renewal of the moon's light closest to the vernal equinox? Yeah. So it's impossible. But that's when the Romans celebrated the birth of the Son of the Sun. It's when the Greeks celebrated the birth of the Son, because in all of these religions, Mother Earth was impregnated, the Mother of God, Queen of Heaven, impregnated by the Sun on the vernal equinox, on the spring equinox, when the Sun is in the constellation of Taurus the Bull, and 9 months later, on the winter solstice.
Maybe Jesus.
There you go. So, moron that has the placard out in front of their home. The gift that is given by Christmas is the gift of the false gods of the Babylonians, of the Greeks, and of the Romans.
Wherever it's spread, Saturn.
Yeah, nothing but paganism is what you are spreading in that regard. If you wanted to celebrate his arrival, it would be celebrating it on Sukkah and understanding what it means to be able to camp out with God. Now, going beyond that, was it God that was given to humanity as a baby? Was Paul right in that the fullness of the Godhead arrived?
No.
No.
No. No.
Child is born.
In fact, would that be possible?
No.
No. Not for us to still be able to be here.
Right. In fact, Yahowah is a seven-dimensional construct, and all of 7 dimensions does not fit into 3.5 dimensions.
No.
And if all of God was in that baby, you wouldn't have much of a God, would you?
No.
I mean, it is absolutely preposterous. And why would Yosha constantly say the Father is greater than I? Why would he say refer people to the Father if in fact he was the totality of God? Who in the hell is the Father if in fact Yosha is the totality of God?
Absurd notion.
Yeah, it's an absurd notion. And so Paul was wrong, and Christianity's focus on, even if they knew his name, even if they knew that he arrived on Sukkah, even if they knew that he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, and Shavuot, and understood what those dates meant, and that that's why he arrived, even if they knew that he was the living embodiment of the Torah, even if they understood that he was a diminished, twice diminished manifestation of Yahowah, twice diminished, and that you're setting apart part of Yahowah, no more than by reference a toenail clipping from an individual, setting apart a part of Yahowah into our world and transitioning that part from spiritual energy to matter, to a physical being, which requires a diminishment at the rate of the speed of light times the speed of light.
Yeah.
So all you have is a tiny, microscopic representation of who God is. Why would you pay homage to? Why would you focus on a tiny representation of who Yahowah is when you can know Yahowah as he is and develop a relationship with the totality of Yahowah? So this idea that Christ was God's gift to the world is preposterous. Not only was he not Greek, not only was he not drugged, the basis of Christo, not only wasn't that his name and isn't a name, but he's just a tiny representation of Yahowah. It's Yahowah, a diminished manifestation of Yahowah, providing us with a means not only of seeing and observing the Torah manifest in our world and how to properly observe the Torah, but also to fulfill the first 4 Moed Mikra, the invitations in the Torah. Why the first 4, and when did he do it? So we're now dealing with Yosha's arrival. When did he, in the broad spectrum of history, when did he fulfill the first 4 Moed Mikra?
In 33 CE, of course, but there's the Passover or Pesach, the week of Matzah. It covers that in Bakorim, and then later.
Yeah. Is 33 CE a relevant number for Yahowah, or does it equate to one?
That's on the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah, it's year 4000 Yah, communicated via the Gregorian or Roman calendar. Now, Yahowah calls Rome the greatest beast that has ever menaced humankind. And he's speaking not only of the empire of Rome, but also of the Roman Catholic Church, and therefore of Christianity as the most dangerous beast, the most vicious beast that has ever menaced humankind. So when you use 33, be aware that you're using the beast's calendar. And so, yes, he was the greater light, shown as a sign for these meeting times, just as it was predicted in the 4th day of creation, where it said the greater light will become a sign of the Moed. Welcome back to Observations. This is our second episode in what hopefully will be a long series of recorded programs for both podcast and for archival retrieval. They're being posted on YouTube, and they're being posted at the blessyahowah.com website for you to listen to. The purpose of the program is to introduce our listeners to God, to understand who He is, why He created the universe, what He wants, what He's offering, how to capitalize upon it, and to understand mankind and human institutions as they distance themselves and their followers from God. Now, in that first episode, guys, we were speaking about the nature of Yahusha and what he did. One of the things that is interesting about him is that while he would cite the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and did so often, he mostly spoke from the heart about what was said in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. For example, his second longest discussion is what's called the Olivet Discourse. It's found late in Matanya, just prior to him fulfilling Pesach. And in the Olivet Discourse, almost every aspect of it is a review of the prophet Zechariah. And Zechariah means to remember Yah. But it's not throughout it a direct citation, word for word, but instead a presentation of what it says from the heart. And it struck me that that's what we're doing on this program. We may do a number of programs that way. We'll do other programs where we actually read what Yahowah said. We will consider every nuance of every word so that we have a full appreciation of it precisely what he said. And we'll do most programs that way. But occasionally, we're going to present Yahowah's nature, his plan, his family-oriented covenant relationship, his invitations to meet from the heart. And I always wondered, guys, when I was reading the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and it says, you should love Yahowah, your God, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, and with all of your heart. Why it would say heart? And then I came to realize that Yahowah is going to write his Torah, he says, on our heart when he returns on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033, and Yom Kippurim occurs sundown on October 2nd on the Roman pagan calendar in 2033. He says at that moment he is going to write his Torah in our heart. And what he is saying is that the eyes are a marvelous tool, for example, to observe. We can use our eyes to read. We can use our eyes to observe what's happening around us. We can use our ears to listen when we're talking about what God has to offer, who He is, and what He has to say. So that's a means of observing what is happening around us, the evidence that's available to us to consider. And then we have these marvelous brains with this unique tool that Yahowah gave us. And what is the only uniqueness between animals and a very specific animal, humankind? In the creation story, how does Yahowah differentiate man from all the other animals that have a soul?
He gave him a nesama.
Yeah, nesama.
Nefesh soul.
Yeah, the nefesh is soul. Nesama is a conscience. A nefesh is consciousness. That's the difference between animals and plants. With animals, they're capable of observing their environment and responding to it. A plant cannot observe its environment and respond to it. They don't have a nefesh soul, a consciousness. But the difference between humans and other animals is that God gave us a nesama, which is a conscience. Right. So with our minds, we can reason. We can think. We can execute good judgment. We can discern between right and wrong, good and bad, truth and lies. And so when we're talking about our brain, that's how our brain was designed to work, so that we observe information, we process it in our brains, we use this nasama, this sense of judgment, to transition from knowing to understanding and to making good decisions regarding what we've come to know. And when we have done that, and we have taken the next step, which is, it's one thing and it's hugely beneficial to go from being ignorant to knowing. Religions are based on faith, which is based on ignorance. But with the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, Yahowah is absolutely knowable. And while knowing Him is hugely superior to being ignorant, to being religious, to being faith-based, knowing only gets you so far. Understanding is required to respond properly. Go ahead.
You don't even have to be religious. Knowing Him is better than just being even agnostic for, I think there's a God. I think there's a God.
Right.
I believe there's a God. Knowing is far superior to just believing.
Of course, yes, hugely.
So I was just pointing out that you don't have to be religious. I mean, there's people out there that think there's a God, and they're not religious at all. But they still have the chance to know Him, and that would be better than what they're currently doing.
Right. But Hasatan, we began this program by talking about Sharia-compliant airlines and serving halal food, and it's halal bin shakar, that is Satan. Yahowah uses the term Baal, which means Lord, to describe Him throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, because that's His nature. He wants to lord over humankind, even wants to lord over God. Through this whole process of coming to know God, you need to understand that Hasatan knows God. He knows Yahowah. Mm-hmm. He not only knows He exists, he knows exactly who He is. Not going to help him any. So you have to go beyond knowing God to have any benefit. And so that transition is from knowing to understanding, is using your nasama, your conscience, to exercise good judgment. It's one of the reasons why the most prominent religion today, socialist secular humanism, is based on political correctness, which makes it a sin to be judgmental. Because the moment you acquiesce good judgment, being discriminating and discerning, you can no longer exercise free will in a reasoned, moral way. You lose the ability to make informed and rational choices. You are easily manipulated.
You've taken away free will. You've taken away people's free will. That's what
you have.
All of it has done.
Yes, yeah. This whole idea of freedom in a politically correct culture is a meaningless concept.
Well, they've done the same thing that the Catholics did in the first 1,000 years of Christendom. Is they took away all the books and kept them to them, and you can't keep away the books, but you can certainly change all the books to read, or you can dummy down the populace through your universities and your schools, which they did with progressive education. So,
right. They can teach in I think it was Atlanta schools or Alabama schools. You can Georgia schools that you can teach the Islamic profession of faith, but you can't teach the contradictions and the immoral nature of the Quran.
So there's no open discussion at the end of the lesson.
Right. Correct. Yes. You can refer to Muhammad as the Prophet Muhammad, but you can't say in the popular media or in education that he can't be a prophet because A, he never issued a single prediction that came true, and the Quran itself admits that he was incapable of prophecy. Mm-hmm. So you can't call him a prophet and be rational, but yet you cannot say anything other than the Prophet Muhammad in the media or in academia, and anybody who challenges that will not be heard. So, foregoing free will. So if we get back to this idea of the heart, so if we go from first ignorance to knowing, that's a huge step forward, to using our nasama to going from knowing to understanding, now we have empowerment. This idea of understanding now prepares someone for the next step along the way, which is acceptance. Are you willing to embrace what you've come to understand? Are you willing to trust what you've come to understand? Are you willing to accept what you've come to understand? And in this case, the understanding that we're talking about is the guidance that Yahowah provides for us in His Torah about who He is, what He wants, and what He's offering. And so as we make our way from knowing to understanding to accepting, at that point we are transitioning from something that is in our heads to something that's in our hearts, that's in essence part of the very fabric of our lives. It's our perspective. It's our motivation. It's our attitude. It literally creates and defines who we are. And so when you speak from the heart, which you have here, and it mirrors this idea that upon Yahowah's return, when He reaffirms the covenant, He's going to do so by writing His Torah, His guidance in our heart, that at that point, once you've come to know, and then understand, and then accept, at that point you're able to speak from the heart and communicate the very essence of who God is, what He wants, what He's offering, and the benefits that are to be derived from knowing Him. And I suspect, since Yahushua was the living embodiment of the Torah, knew it as well as it could be known since He was its author, and since He understood it as well as could be, as anyone possibly could, since He's the one that conceived it, and since He was the living embodiment of it, He was the totality of what it means to accept it, to trust it, to rely upon it, to deploy it. He was able to speak from the heart and explain the Torah, prophets, and Psalms to us in ways that were facilitated our understanding. So that's why I think so much of what He had to say, He spoke from the heart about what was already written in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and that's how we are beginning today.
Your heart is also where people think they credit your emotions and your passions and your drive. You hear all the time, oh, his heart's really in this, and
I agree with you, and I think passion is something that Yahowah appeals to Yahowah a lot, and it is emotional. I mean, he speaks when he recognizes how humankind went astray and became a vicious, religious and political, militaristic creature, that He grieved at even conceiving humankind. And I'm sure that Yahowah grieved as He was going through a 1,000-year period where He told us that He was looking for someone with whom He could relate, with whom He could share, with whom He could communicate. He couldn't find anyone. And so when man attacked the diminished manifestation of Yahowah as Yahushua, I think in all of that time, Yahowah grieves, which means he is emotional just as we're emotional. The fact is that I don't think that's the primary meaning of from the heart. I think the primary meaning from the heart is a wholesale incorporation of what the Torah and its covenant represent into our very nature, so that it is who we are. It's how we view the world.
Speaking of that, when I translate a Hebrew word, I look at the concrete first as my primary meaning before I go to the abstract. Because they were generally, in the ancient words, they were very concrete thinkers before you get to the Greek periods, when we become a lot more abstract thinkers. So, if I was looking at the same word of whether it be the heart or understanding, being, and so forth, I would look at first, what does it mean in the hardcore concrete, and then I'd add all the other stuff to it for a deeper understanding.
Yeah, Ben, we're going to return to that just in a second. I want to welcome Larry, who's the fourth member of our team into the program. Larry, do you recall the time when we first began to know one another, and you were quoting from the various things that I had written, and I encouraged you to refrain from doing so until you were quoting it as your own, but what you were quoting from Yahowah was quoting from your heart, that this is what God said. You understood what he said. So you weren't quoting from me. You were quoting from the very God you'd come to know, and how much more effective it was going to be when you could quote it as your own.
Yes, I recall that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
made a big difference, didn't it?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you really have to understand the material.
Right.
And I see what you're getting at. Once it's your own, once it's written in your heart, you own it.
Yeah. You own it. Yeah. It becomes part of the fabric of your life. And it's ultimately empowering, because a person who has accepted something is much more totally empowered to deploy, to convey what they have learned, as someone who understands it but has not accepted it. And as someone who understands material is almost infinitely superior in their ability to deploy it than someone who simply knows the material. You know, like scholars in the university setting, they know an enormous amount about their subject, but they understand very little. And yet there's still this huge chasm between understanding and acceptance, or incorporation of the material into the very nature of your life. So that's indeed what we're talking about here, from the heart.
I've got somebody right now on FB. There's two of them telling me that I'm a member of a cult, and they're on another guy's post. His name's Doug White. So I'm sitting here doing the defending. I've shared passage after passage of Yahweh's words, even talking about the Christmas tree and people who call him Lord and all this other stuff. And they go, well, we just happen to disagree. So,
yeah, but who's he disagreeing with? Is he disagreeing?
You know what I just told him? I said, if you disagree, you're disagreeing with God, not with
That's
me.
Right. Right. Well, actually, it's disagreeing with both, because Yahowah is part of the fabric of your life. Your view and Yahweh's view are the same. And so, yeah, he is disagreeing with you, but the fact he's disagreeing with you is immaterial to him. What should be material to him is that Yahweh's, God's own testimony is irrelevant to this person who thinks they are in a religious relationship with God.
Right.
And the fact that they are aligned with a cult that was born out of the most vicious beast that man ever conceived, Rome, and Christianity is a beast of Rome, then they can't see that. They're unwilling to even consider the stupidity of the religion, of Christmas, of Easter, of Sunday worship, of worshiping God. Imagine a deity so insecure that deity created a being to worship him. And it's repulsive. Of God dying for one's sins.
What God do you worship? I said, I'm not involved in any worship, and if there's any worshiping going on, you're dealing with the wrong God, period. End of story.
Right. Yes, false gods want to be worshipped. The real God does not.
Right.
And it's so demeaning to God to think that he wants to be worshipped. What a ridiculous, moronic, insecure, a perverted God would be.
Model type of deity.
Yeah. This is Adolf Hitler as God. Acquiesce and worship me, salute me, acknowledge me as the leader, or I'm going to torture you. It's just like the idea in Christianity that all souls go to heaven or hell. What kind of a sadistic God would say, acquiesce to me and to some ritualistic notion, or I'm going to see to it that you're tortured forever in hell?
Hello?
Yeah, halal. Yeah, we're right back to halal, the God of Christianity. And that the person who would call Yahweh's covenant a cult is someone who is unaware of the fact that throughout human history, lies have always been popular, and the truth about God has always been very unpopular. What did Yahowah say on the Sermon on the Mount as he began to explain the truth of the Torah and of Yahowah's means to life? Did he say that it was very popular and lots of people know it, or that it was very unpopular and almost no one recognizes it?
The latter of the two, I believe.
Yeah. When Yahowah etched in stone the second of the three statements on the first of the two tablets, and he was describing the father's negative influence on their sons, did he say that that was very limited, or say it went on generation after generation after generation?
He said it was generation after generation after generation, and that's exactly what we've got.
Right, exactly. Now, when he said that his mercy would be available to those who observe the terms and conditions of the covenant, did he specify a number of people who would benefit from the terms and conditions of the covenant? Did he use a numerical term?
Yeah, thousands. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said thousands. What is thousands amongst billions?
It's a very rare animal. 1 in a million, or less.
1 in a million. Yeah, 1 in a million. So, by Yahowah's testimony, the truth about who he is, what he's offering, and how to capitalize on it is extremely unpopular. So if you're part of a religion, if you're part of a political mantra, if you're part of a propagandist national mantra that is popular, you are clinging to something that is not from God. Because he said that the way to death and to the destruction of one's soul was extremely popular, and most people find it. So if the person is clinging to this idea that what we have come to know is unpopular, therefore it's a cult, when in fact they're prescribing something that is popular, by Yahowah's own testimony, they have to be wrong. It doesn't mean that we're right, unless what we say is 100% consistent with what Yahowah says, which it is. But it means absolutely unequivocally that the religion that they are prescribing to, if it is popular, and there's no religion in human history that's ever been as popular as Christianity, that it, by Yahowah's own definition, is wrong. So it's impossible for them to be right.
May I ask?
Sure.
How can you get cult out of observing the Torah?
Because they're not listening. Because they're not listening. Yeah, because they're not listening. Because they don't want to even consider that. Because from their perspective, the Torah is dead. You know, Paul, the author of the cult that became Christianity, Paul said that the Torah can be equated to a dead husband. He wrote that in Romans 7. It was probably the most disturbing, most convoluted, most irrational, most disingenuous, delusional statement ever presented in the name of God. And that takes some doing, because you've got Scientology and Mormonism and Islam, which are unbelievably stupid, just ridiculously stupid, to say that Paul's presentation of the Torah as being dead and equating the author of the Torah to a dead husband in Romans 7 is about as bad as it ever could be. And in Galatians, Paul's first letter, now Paul is the founder of the Christian religion, because Yahowah was Torah observant. So therefore there is no Christianity based upon Yahowah. It's Paul that is the founder of the Christian religion, that Paul in Galatians said that the Torah can't save. So if we say, and we speak the truth, when we say what we are sharing, what we're observing, what we're coming to understand and explaining is the Torah, as it was authored by God himself, Yahowah. They can't process that. They can't even consider it, because from their perverted perspective, the Torah has no merit.
But But he's
Now, they carry it around in their Holy Bible, but they say that it no longer prevails. Why do they even carry it around if they're not willing to consider its the testimony of? Yeah, lighten your load. If it's no longer valuable, if it can no longer save, if it represents a deceased deity who has been replaced by your Jesus Christ, why carry it around?
Yeah, why quote the flood? Why talk about the flood? Why talk about any of these things? That God's dead.
Why talk about creation?
Prophecies or any of that.
Right.
No, you've invented your own. You've invented your own monster. Actually, a zombie god who runs around with poor judgment skills that forgives everybody for everything.
Right. Who's a lousy communicator.
Clerics, but then you guys follow the religious clerics.
You know, according to Paul, the God of the Torah could not save. The God of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms was impotent, was incompetent. He was mean. He was irrelevant. And that the reason, according to Paul, that the God of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms contracted with him was because he was capable of coming up with a new story, a new plan, based entirely on faith that could accomplish what the God who authored the Torah, prophets, and Psalms could not do. So what do you think the odds are that that's true?
Not at all. First off, not at all. There's no chance. But think about that. He said the creator of all, somebody that he himself has created to be all-knowing, ever-present, can't come up with a plan on his own. That guy needed to come to a human.
So the God that actually created the universe, the God who had enough intelligence, enough energy to conceive the entire universe and make it manifest without diminishing himself, and then had the wherewithal to come up with a plan, a language to author life, which is the most interesting part of creation, and then spoke to that creation, engaged with that creation, and shared his guidance with that creation via the Torah, and then told of that creation's history, past, present, and future, from creation all the way to the demise of this universe as it exists and the creation of a new one. That entity who authored these Torah, prophets, and Psalms, that entity was incapable of saving, was incapable of conceiving a good plan, was incapable of communicating effectively, but a murderous man who was a sexual pervert by his own admission, who by his own admission was insane, by his own admission was demon-possessed, that individual was God's answer to the world? Because God was incompetent in this person? Oh, man, yeah, he was smarter, better, and more credible than God.
Not to mention that, like you said, God could see past, present, and future. He had all the components to the equation, but the guy that could only see past and present, or some of the present, that's the guy that he had to go to figure out the plan.
And that guy's testimony was not only disingenuous, but why would God, 666 years before this man named Shaul changed his name to Paulos, meaning lowly and little, Shaul means question him, that this man named Shaul, why did God, 666 years before he would write his first letter, that to the Galatians, tell us that Shaul was the plague of death, if in fact he was the way to life?
Well, they want to make him a liar. I think one of the most telling is the breakdown on what Shimon really said about Paul's letters. Their catch-all is always 2 Peter 3:16. The one Calvin said proved, that 2 Peter wasn't written by Shimon. Because he knew right there that was the end of him. He calls Paulos a sophist. Now, once somebody calls you sophist, that's the. Would you want anyone who represented Yahowah calling you a sophist, John?
No, because it means that you're dependent upon human philosophy and human understanding as it's portrayed in human philosophy, religion, and politics. And that's precisely what he said. And he also went on to say that Paul's letters use circular reasoning and that they lead people astray to their doom.
To destruction. I mean...
To destruction, right. No, there was no one on planet Earth that understood Shaul, Paul, better than Shimon, Peter. And he told us exactly who this demon was.
Welcome back to Observations, a program designed to introduce our listeners to God, a program designed for those who already know Yahowah to help all of us understand who God is, even better, a program designed to share why he created the universe, what he wants, to communicate what he's offering, so that those of us who have not yet capitalized on his gift could know how to do so. A program designed to communicate the past, the present, and future as it relates to not only human history, but God's interaction with mankind. And so as we left the last segment, we were talking about what it means to come first to reject faith and belief and ignorance, and to come to know who God is based upon what he has revealed.
Faith and belief are both pagan concepts. They're just, when you walk out of Babylon and you come to the realization that faith and belief are pagan concepts, it's pretty profound. And then you think about it and you go, well, that was obvious.
When you recognize that Paul, who wrote in Greek, never communicates in his words in any language other than Hebrew. Now, we can translate his Hebrew communication into other languages so long as we understand the nuances of Hebrew and we understand the accurate meaning of the words that he deployed in Hebrew, and to define and describe those words as accurately and completely as possible in the other language as we are transitioning from Hebrew into English in this program. Paul wrote in Greek, and Paul used a Greek word that at one time was equivalent to trust and reliance. It was pistos, the Greek term. But because of the application of pistos in Paul's letters, and the fact that Paul is the basis of the founder of the Christian religion, the most popular religion in human history, the word that he used, which at one time meant trust and reliance, now is understood as faith and belief. And it's why the most popular religion, Christianity, is known as a faith. It's a belief system. In fact, Christianity and faith, Christianity and belief are absolutely inseparable concepts. And the thing that most people do not understand is that Paul urges those who had listened to him and who read his letters to believe him, and yet he provides absolutely no basis, no information that would provide any explanation or any credibility, any basis for knowing, any basis even for believing. So belief in Christianity is a leap of faith into the darkness where there is absolutely no basis for it. In fact, you look about how many Christian concepts are that way, that have no basis in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, or any of God's inspired testimony. Can't be found in Yosha's testimonies, can't be found in anywhere, at any place in God's communication to us. Let's just talk about a few of those. How about church? Is there a reference to anything even remotely akin to a church coming from Yahowah?
No, not.
How about from Yosha?
There's things he discusses that describe churches, but they're always in highly negative terms, and of course not. Yosha, it is preposterous to believe that that Yahowah, who railed against the religious, who railed against religion, invented one based on the life.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here, literally devil's advocate. I read in my my book named Bible, that Jesus Christ said that to Peter that upon this rock I will build my church. So he must have a church if he said, I will build my church. How can how can he not have a church if he said that?
Writing on a piece of paper, he spoke Hebrew, and he said, upon this rock I will build my mikveh, which would be the equivalent of the Moed mikveh, and that was translated to ecclesia, which meant called out assemblies like Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and so forth. And then they just copy edited it to church after they wrote Kekurin, I believe. So they replaced one Greek word with another Greek word and then went to church. But I think somebody I read once said that's as curious, replacing one Greek word like ecclesia with another Greek word is as curious as translating Torah to tadpole.
Of course.
Is that true?
So what we're saying here is that Yahowah spoke only one language. Could he have spoken other languages? Yeah.
Sure.
Did he speak other languages?
Nope.
No. He spoke one language, it was Hebrew. Now, I understand that there's a place where it says he said, my God, why have you forsaken me, in Aramaic. Do you know that Hebrew and Aramaic are so close that, for example, in the book of Daniel, which is the only book that contains any Aramaic testimony, that the verbs are essentially identical, and the nouns are spelled almost identically. That the difference between Hebrew and Aramaic is extraordinarily small. And so to read Aramaic, if you can read Hebrew, you can read Aramaic, and vice versa. And all likelihood, the account of him speaking Aramaic on my God, why have you forsaken me, is a person not recognizing that, not understanding Hebrew, understanding Aramaic, and mistaking the Hebrew for Aramaic. But even that one statement, the reason we know he spoke it in Hebrew is, in that particular case, he was not asking a question. He was not asking, my God, why have you forsaken me? What was he instead doing, guys?
He's quoting 22?
Yeah, correct. He was quoting the opening line from Psalm 22. The opening line of Psalm 22 is what he was quoting. Why did he quote the opening line of Psalm 22 in Hebrew?
It was the prophetic the picture of what was going to happen on Passover.
Yeah, he was at that very moment fulfilling that eyewitness account of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And as a matter of fact, Psalm 22 is not just a depiction of what was occurring at that moment on Pesach and what had just occurred on Pesach, Passover. It is also a prophetic announcement of what would occur on Matzah. In fact, it spends a considerable amount of time on Matzah and then concludes with Bikurim. So it is the most accurate eyewitness account of what he was doing. So he was telling you, if you want to understand what I'm doing, look at the statements that I authored 1,000 years ago to the day about what is occurring here, Psalm 22. So he spoke Hebrew. So, Larry, when we read in something like Matthew, did Matthew write his account of Yahowah's words and deeds in Greek or in Hebrew?
Hebrew.
Right. And we know he wrote it in Hebrew because there are not only rabbinic, but many historical testimony of how his account was originally written in Hebrew and then later translated into English. Do you know why we don't have a copy of what he wrote in Hebrew?
Yes, the rabbis burned them all.
That is
They brag about it in the Talmud.
Yeah, the Romans burned copies of the Torah. They soaked copies of the Torah in water and then wrapped it around people and then burned them alive. Anyone who could read Hebrew, because the Roman Empire's and the Roman Catholic Church's most feared enemy was Yahowah and his Torah. So anybody could read Hebrew, they killed, and they destroyed all copies of the Torah. But it was the rabbis themselves who destroyed copies of Matan Yah written in Hebrew. And the Mishnah and the Talmud are filled with testimony of how they dealt with the first followers of Yahusha who spoke and wrote in Hebrew. So when Matan Yah was quoting Yahusha, he did not say, upon this rock I will build my church. He said, upon, which is all, this Zoth specific, Sur, T-S-U-W-R, this rock, which is also the rock of our Sadak, or uprightness, or salvation, I will build, which is E-Bana. Bana means to create, to establish a family home. I will build my Mikra. And we know it was Mikra because, as you said, what is the Greek word that was used to translate what Yahusha said in Hebrew?
Oh, that's the
Ecclesia.
Ecclesia.
Right. And what does ecclesia mean?
It means called out assemblies.
Right. It's called out assemblies. And what is the simplest definition of kara, which is the basis of mikra?
Separate.
To call out.
To call out and invite. Yep.
Yeah, to call out. Now, as is the case, and this is why we talked about this, as is the case with every Hebrew word, we can convey in English what Yahowah said in Hebrew, so long as we understand what he said in Hebrew. Kara is the term that he used as the basis of mikra. So if we want to understand what he said, we have to consider, closely examine, and carefully consider the meaning of kara in the title mikra, to understand what he said, that upon this rock I will build my mikra. You're not going to get that understanding from Ecclesia Greek, because he did not communicate in Greek, he did not speak Greek, he did not share this message in Greek, and therefore you need to just leave the Greek alone once you realize that that Ecclesia does not mean church. There is no connotation, association of any kind between Ecclesia and church. Church is like, as you said, Larry, it's like replacing Torah with tadpole. I mean, that's how far afield it is. Church is based upon the name of the daughter of Helios, of the sun, in the Germanic religions. It's the basis of circuit and circus and circle, as the circle of the sun. And church was the daughter of Helios.
Yeah, and that's why when Yahowah returns, he says they've been burned and blinded by the sun. And,
they have.
You know,
correct.
I mean, he's talking about the sun god religions,
right.
you know, Mithraism, and all the
why
rest
he condemns Babel. That Babel means confusion. The basis of the word that Christians use to describe their holy text, Bible. Mm-hmm. It means confusion. So what Yahusha said is, upon this rock I will establish the family associated with my mikra. He was telling us that the mikra, or plural mikre, were going to be the basis of establishing the family. How many mikre are there?
7.
Which is the first one of them?
Pesach, Passover.
What happened the following day?
That would be matzah.
Right. And the day that he spoke this, he actually spoke it on Pesach, because he had just left having dinner, the Pesach dinner, with his chosen disciples or learners, correct?
Yep.
And in fact, as he said this to Shimon, he was headed to that event. So he had just celebrated Pesach dinner. He was about to be the Pesach lamb. And so he's telling us that Pesach is, in fact, the first step in building a family. And it is, because we're mortal. We have to become immortal. That's the purpose of Pesach. What's the second of these Moed Mikre? What was he going to endure the following day?
Sheol.
Yeah, matzah. And he was going to go to Sheol to remove the corruption of politics and religion from our soul. And how do we know that yeast, which is fungus, permeating the bread, represents human corruption? Did Yosha explain that?
And then from Egypt,
he did.
Yeah, but also didn't he tell us, as he was talking to his disciples, and his disciples, he asked them, do you have any bread? And they said, oh my God, we forgot the bread. And they were having a conniption fit, and he said, wait a minute. Come on, guys. I've been with you all this time. Don't you know that if I wanted to make bread, I'd just make bread? I'm talking to you about, do you understand what the bread, and particularly matzah, unyeasted bread, represents? He says, do you not understand that the yeast represents the scribes and the Pharisees, which is politics and religion? That's what the yeast represents. And he told them as they were sailing on the Sea of Galilee that the yeast represents politics and religion. It is removed on matzah. Yosha is removing politics and religion from us when he fulfills matzah. What's the third of the Moed Mikra? When he speaks, he says, upon this rock I will build my Moed Mikra.
First fruits.
Yeah, the third is first fruits. Firstborn child. It's from Bakar. It means the firstborn, and it's YM, which is plural in Hebrew. So it's firstborn children. This is about a family. And who was the first child born into the family of children of God?
Yahowah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so he became the firstborn into Yahowah's covenant family. And as a new child in that family, was he recognizable to anyone?
No, he wasn't.
No. No, as a matter of fact, at the garden, the women that had spent all of those years with him did not recognize him, mistook him for the gardener. When
he was the gardener. Now,
right.
Can you imagine that your son that you raised, that you loved, was murdered in front of you in a gruesome crucifixion,
right.
And the next day you don't recognize him?
Yeah. Zero possibility of that, unless he was no longer in the same body. That body had to have been destroyed, and he was now in an entirely different body. And when he walked into the empty room with the learners, the disciples that he had spent 3 years with, did they recognize him?
Nope.
Hey, well, if you had a body, could you walk through a wall?
Only if I was a Shaolin priest.
Yeah. By the way, if Yosha had that same body that he walked through the wall, how would he have been affixed to the upright pole that was the Pesach?
He couldn't have been.
Couldn't have been, could he? If he had that same kind of body, how could he have been whipped?
Couldn't have happened.
Right. So he walked through the wall, was not recognized. In fact, at the end, when he shows up for breakfast with the fellas, after they have failed to recognize him in the upper room, the evening of Pesach, actually now it's the following day, when he met with them for breakfast sometime thereafter, now he's already shown up, and they've already seen him now, post-crucifixion, post-Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. Did they recognize him when he showed up for breakfast?
Nope.
Nope. When he met with the two guys on the road to Emmaus that had witnessed the last year of Yosha's life and had witnessed the crucifixion, and he accompanies them and begins to chat with them about all that they have seen, and they say, man, they tell him, they say, are you clueless as to what's happened these past 3 days? And he turns to them and says, are you guys morons? You have no idea who I am? They didn't recognize him either, did they?
No, and they never would. I mean, they began to understand after all this. I mean, they were in a tizzy. They were blown away. They didn't understand it. And of course, when you're seeing something supernatural like that, I can understand that. I really can.
And because if God's intent were to create a religion based upon Easter Sunday, and And by the way, Bikurim only occurs on the first day of the week, on average once every 7 years. So this idea that Yahowah has a Good Friday and an Easter Sunday says that you're clueless as to what he was doing and what days he was fulfilling these promises. But this idea that God was resurrected is utter and complete nonsense, because if that was the purpose, that his body was brought back from the dead and that he was back in his physical body, then the testimony we would have been given would have been the antithesis of the testimony we have been given. They would have said they recognized him as opposed to no one recognized him. But the eyewitness accounts that were written 1,000 years earlier, in Psalm 22 and Psalm 88 and Yeshayah 53 and 54, doesn't it say that after Matzah, that he would be reacquainted with the light?
Mm-hmm.
So the set-apart spirit
exactly
that left
what it
him
says. It says
at the
soul was a ransom in Sheol, and it met back up with the light.
That is
exactly what it says.
Right.
Yep.
So the set-apart spirit that had left him on Pesach, because God cannot die and God cannot go to the place of separation, the set-apart spirit that left the body and soul of Yosha on Pesach was reunited, not with the body, but with the soul of Yosha, when it was released from Matzah to create Bikurim, and it was that new integration of set-apart spirit and which is energy, light, and the soul of Yosha that was manifest to the disciples and to the women in his life, and that's why they didn't recognize him. He was not who he had been physically. There was no resurrection. What happened to the body?
It was disintegrated.
Disintegrated. It was destroyed.
Yeah, according to the Pesach instructions, it was burned up in the fire.
Yes, it was. Gone. So there is no body. And so
When Paul does, all he does is he says, God's dead, long live the new God.
right.
Who becomes Jesus, the Son of God.
And
So, I mean,
the
that's
full representative of the new God, of course, is Paul.
Yeah.
Who condemns everything that the old God said and did.
But it's so obvious, though.
Yes. Well, once you recognize, once your eyes are open, your mind is open, once you realize that there is a 0% possibility that God would have chosen someone to not only contradict him, but to condemn everything that he previously said. Once you recognize that it is irrational, stupid, ridiculous to think that the Creator God of the universe was incapable of saving, that it was incapable of coming up with a plan that would work, and that he needed a pathetic man who, by his own admission, was insane, demon-possessed, murderous, and perverted, to come up with a plan because he couldn't. And that is Christianity, folks. That's what is written in Galatians. That is what's written in Romans. That's what's written in Corinthians. Once you come to realize that's preposterous because your mind is open, you're going to deal with the information rationally, that there is no possibility whatsoever that that could have occurred, and that Paul's writings not only contradicts his own writings, but Yahowah's testimony, then you realize that Christianity is the plague of death, just as Yahowah said it would be.
And that brings us right back to Christmas.
Yeah, in fact, in Jeremiah, which is an open book to Gentiles, it's the only one of the books in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms that was specifically addressed to Gentiles. What does it say of the Christmas tree?
Well, it says don't.
What it says is never follow these people. It's delusional.
Right, it's delusional.
That's what it says.
It says this idea of chopping a tree down and propping it up in bringing it into one's home and propping it up so it doesn't teeter, and decorating it with ornaments of silver and gold, and showing reverence from it is moronic. It's offensive. It's just inane. It's stupid. And then speaking of the Christian New Testament, how does he, in that same book, in the 31st chapter, how does he go about condemning the very notion that he would have a New Testament based on faith that was contradictory to his Torah?
that when he says it's totally complete and lacking nothing?
Yeah. Well, when he says in Jeremiah 31, he says that when he reaffirms his Torah, or his covenant, that he will do so with, he doesn't say the Gentiles or with the church, does he?
It says Israelites and Yehudim.
Right. And not only does he say that, but then he says that the only difference between the covenant as it was through Abraham and the covenant as it will be the day that he returns, there's only one difference. And what is that one difference?
Inside us.
Pardon? Yeah, it's inside of us. Yeah, he writes his Torah inside of us. And so, since God has not yet done that, that means that the covenant has not been renewed. And it also means, since it's the Torah that is being written inside of us, when the covenant is reaffirmed, that is the distinctive feature. That means that there is a zero possibility that Yahowah discarded the Torah to go to a New Testament, only to return to the Torah, which the New Testament says is the Nept. So the book written to Gentiles completely destroys the myth of a New Testament that is different than the Torah, because it's his return. His reaffirmation of the covenant is based on the wholesale integration of his Torah. You fellows know why God couldn't just do that now? Why couldn't he write his Torah inside of us now? Now, you and I, we can put his Torah inside of us now.
Mm-hmm. Because that would take away choice.
That's correct.
That would, we have to have choice right to the end.
Right.
Do
you think that Yahowah wants to deal with humanity as we are? When was Yahowah's last expression about vicious, militant, religious, political man? When did he last, what was his last testimony against humankind that had degraded to that point? What did he have to say about it?
You mean during the flood? Or
during the flood. Yeah.
He said he's going to destroy it.
Right, he says, because I grieved that I'd even created them. Do you think God wants to grieve forever and spend all eternity with the mankind as we are?
No, it's too painful.
It would be too painful. And so the reason that he created instructions that Noah chose to follow and act upon, that saved Noah and his family from the malicious nature of humankind, was to say that he has a plan which is designed to do exactly the same thing for us. If we wish to distance ourselves from humankind, if we wish to listen to what Yahowah has to say, if we wish to act upon it, then we too can be saved from the viciousness and the putrid, perverted nature of religious and political and militant man, to spend eternity with God, because God only wants those who have rejected the things that grieve him to being part of his eternal family. Otherwise, it would be miserable for all of us. So, guys, what is the first condition of the covenant, consistent with the story of Noah, consistent with the story of Abraham, consistent with what we've just said about God?
2 words: walk away.
Walk away. And he said specifically, walk away from your country. Mm-hmm. What country was Abram in?
Babylon. Babel.
Yeah, of the Chaldeans. Chaldean is the term that Yahowah uses to describe the integration of Assyria and Babylonia and Sumer as they had become one integrated monstrosity. And the word for Babel, it means ba in Hebrew is with or in, and Bel in Hebrew is the Lord. So it's with the Lord, in the Lord. And to be with the Lord and in the Lord, because Baal in Hebrew is the name and title of Satan, means with Satan and in Satan. And then as a verb, what does Babel mean?
Confusion.
Yeah.
Babel.
Fuse. Right.
It's Babel's own.
Right. And so this is what Yahowah specifically says, that unless you are willing to walk away from your country, and that country representing Babylon, confusion, being with the Lord, being with Satan, then you are not welcome to engage in a relationship with you. He will not engage in a relationship with you. He'll invite you. I mean, he invited all of us to be part of his family, gave us the invitation to be part of his family while we were still in Babylon, all of us. But unless we were willing to walk away from Babel, from confusion, from being influenced by Satan's politics and militarism and religion, that would be the end of the conversation. First requirement to being part of the covenant is to walk away from Babel. That means from your Bible. That means away from your Lord. It means away from your country, away from societal customs, away from religion, away from politics, away from militarism. All of the things that Yahowah specifically condemns in the book of Jeremiah, of Yirmiyah. The entire book is written to condemn those things. I think that is the hardest thing for the vast preponderance of people to do. You know how hard it is to disassociate from Christianity in this culture?
Oh, I do. I've shared over 80 passages with two religious whores right now.
Yeah.
And they say, you think you're impressive because you have parentheses. I said, those are what the words mean. There's no way around it. They 100% oppose Yahweh's word in advance of Babylon.
We'll be back in a moment and continue to talk about the terms and conditions of the covenant.
Due to a computer issue, the final segment of the show was corrupted, and I lost it, and I was able to reclaim and save some of the file. And it was the final few minutes of the show. I wanted to put them out there so they could be heard, and so that way you would know and kind of get an idea of what had already transpired. The parts that were saved were pretty, I thought, pretty good points to have out there for people. So here it is, the final reclaimed audio from the segment with Kirk, Larry, and Craig. Thank you.
Observe, closely examine, and carefully consider the instructions regarding the conditions for participating in the family relationship, the covenant. If you don't closely examine them and carefully consider them, you cannot act upon them in a way that will benefit you. That's why when somebody says, just give me a brief summation of what I need to do to be saved, I said, Yahowah doesn't do that. I won't do that. I will tell you what's important, but unless you are willing to invest the time to engage, you aren't going to know that. Let me give you a great example. You were speaking of the fundamentals earlier, and we were talking about the heart. Do you know what two letters comprise heart in Hebrew? It's leb.
Yeah, well, it's the leader, led by the
staff.
It's
the shepherd's staff, lamed, which is the being led by someone who cares for you, who is protecting you, who is nourishing you, who genuinely is looking after your interest and leading you in the right direction. It's equivalent to the Torah. The Torah is guidance and instruction and direction. Well, the leb is the mechanism of the shepherd guiding and leading his sheep, so it's leb. And then the second letter of heart is the be'at, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's guidance and leadership and instructions regarding, the home.
Right.
The family. So when you take it to heart, what Yahowah is saying is that you're processing and following the guidance that he has provided regarding the home. That's what it means, taking it to heart.
Right.
That's what it means to observe the letters that comprise the words. And for those who are new to Yahowah, Yahowah conveyed his Torah using an alphabet that was conveyed via pictures. And every one of the letters, there are 22 letters in Hebrew, of which 5 are vowels, and each of the letters communicates a concept. And so if you look at the picture of what they're describing, in this case, leb, heart, the shepherd's staff, and the depiction of a floor plan of a home with one entrance, by the way, then you know home, and Be'eth, the Hebrew word for that second letter, is the Hebrew word for family. And then you realize that Be'eth is the basis of Bereth, which is the covenant, so that the covenant is a family, and it's therefore Yahweh's family and Yahweh's home, and that the shepherd staff is leadership and guidance and direction to that home and protection of those in the home.
Well known protection.
Then you know what it is that Yahweh is encouraging you to put in your heart. It's all there. All you have to do is observe it. But Larry, as we have talked so many times, 99.999% of people will reject Yahweh's testimony, just as the person that you were debating today, because they don't want to know what God says. They aren't even open to what God has to say. And yet we are on this program called Observation.